industrial base, the greater the electricity consumption. So we need to ensure that we give the country the assurance that that electricity is there. So Red Rocket, of course, was successful in three of these four new bidders in relation to new generation capacity, and ENGIE completes, if you like, the four allocations that we have made a determination on. Again, on this one, the provinces that are going to be location of this solar PV is the Free State and the Northern Cape. So you can see that there's an admission and also an appreciation by private sector that even where you have grid capacity, it's fine, we are going to unlock it, and as we announce the preferred bidders on the ITP, you'll see we are unlocking those corridors. But again, there are geographies and locations in the country where we can still generate PV, if you like, resources. And of course, the Limpopo could be one of those going into the future. The point we are making is that South Africa is an ideal location for us to be able to exploit our renewable energy assets. So we're able to show that indeed we have negotiated, and thanks to the team at IPP led by Ms. Edwards, the conversation they've had with private sector, and now we've got the preferred bidder status of 890 megawatts. Again, what is the size of the investment? Because remember, we're not only answering the question of the megawatts on the grid, but the bigger question is an economic question. We want the South African economy to grow. We want to use energy and its conversion to electricity for us to get the economic shareholding must be South African. There's an additional requirement that 40B is going to happen, it's non-negotiable. I think that point has been made ad nauseum by the novel about what we are doing is done all over the world. We said that for the South African context now, we are introducing players on the rollout of transmission. Of course, transmission is a natural monopoly, will never be handed over into private hands, but we need to tap into the private sector liquidity to be able to roll out this infrastructure. We made the point that $1 billion for us to be able to roll out this program. The fiscals can't carry this, and that's why we needed to find innovative instruments of rolling, and also about 29 gigawatts of this interest is located in the state, must remain true to its promise. When we say the lights are going to come on at this time, the lights must come on. When we say we are going to avert load shedding, we must avert load shedding. When we say we are going to build additional capacity to restart the South African economy, and this is the size of this capacity by this date, we must deliver by that date, provide that capacity, because we are talking about the believability of the state. The state must be believed. When I make pronouncement, we must be believed because we're keeping to that commitment. And today we are keeping to that commitment. We have gone out 31st of July, request for qualification, and now we have our pre-qualified bidders that we are announcing today. And of course, the expectation is that once we announce them, they are going to get into a conversation on the basis of a non-disclosure agreement, because we want them to be part of the conversation on how we structure the RFP. It's important we do this exercise because it is the first time we are doing this kind of program in the country. So we don't want it to fail at first hurdle. And that's why we're investing a lot of energy and resources in ensuring that we are getting it right. Excluding South African partners, we had made the point that from the design of this program going forward, and you will see that there's will be greater South African participation. But in this instance, we are confident about so we don't want those contingent liabilities. So there exist creative instruments that the market has accepted as instruments that are sharp, that can protect their investment, and the credit guarantee is going to come into place by March next year, and then we're able to ensure that we close the request for proposal. We're able to make the necessary announcement by Q3 of next year. This program, much quicker, shorter intervals. There's going to be predictability. We've invested a lot of time in getting the program right. Of course, there were rent seekers. You want to undermine those whose contribution is really parasitic, can be fatal to the program without it in South Africa, because hitherto it was only Eskom doing it. So no one would have done it in South Africa. And that's why really, if you come to think of it, it will be international players who are going to succeed in this space, like I said, over a period of your operational capability, your technical capabilities rather, and also your financial muscle, because you must bring the money to be able to build this program going into the future. So we are happy that of the 17 that responded, we have 7 that are successful. So those are Adani Power, Middle East Limited, of course the lead member there. So there's someone who brings these impeccable credentials to the fore to be examined and scrutinized in this consortium is Adani Power Middle East. And then the second one is RF Cobra Transmission Consortium, the lead member Grupto Cobra South Africa. So, I mean, of all of these, you'll see it's international players. It's the Portuguese is participating in this. What is the bigger message I want to make outside this program? Pursues green projects. Even NTCSTM number 3 consortium that has been pre-qualified is Kaliu, and the lead member is Okavango Project. The other one is State Grid Consortium. The lead member is State Grid International. Number 6 is Transmission of EN South Africa. Like I said, you can see the flavor is an international flavor. I want to levels where we've built enough local capacity. As I conclude, I've made the point, really, whilst the players are international, the lead actors, PP program on the generation side, there are those players who have circumvented the rules, undermined, if you like, what are the transformation elements of this program. We are guarding against those. We worked with, we are working with DTIC, National Treasury, to have, if you like, a dispensation that is going to make sure that we are able to domesticate the benefits. We are not going to export the employment opportunities. We are not going to just import technology over time that must be embedded in the country. There's an insistence that there must be a local capacity. For an example, on the transformer side, we just arrived back from China. What was our reason of going to China? Multifold, but chief amongst those, the primary actors in the value chain of what the components that are required to drive this agenda, they are in China. Even the European players, they go to China for manufacturing. They just put their nameplate on these transformers, the turbines, but they are manufactured there. So instead of going to third parties, we go to the place of origin. But what is our requirement? We are rolling out a 440 billion rand program of ITP. We have announced a 2.2 trillion rand program on the IRP. So the opportunities are in South Africa. If you want to benefit, we are less interested in imports. We want to set up here. And I have made the point that they have agreed. They will set up here. You will see, before the end of the third quarter of next year, we'll make the announcement of additional transformer manufacturing capacity in this country, going over the 330 MVA. We are going to produce it in this country. On the back of this program, we are going to have jobs, high-paying jobs, skills that are going to be introduced. We are going to broaden the industrial base of this country on the back of this program. It's not just about the lights on, it's about putting food on the table. It's about getting people into work. It's about upping the skills of the young people in this country and those that are unemployed. It's about fighting poverty, fighting unemployment, and ensuring that we have a sustainable growth going into the future. We're going to work on the National Industrial Participation Program anchored around the work that we are doing in SAREM. So the bigger point I'm making is that the announcement of today is not just about those who are pre-qualified. It's about the value addition. It's about beneficiation. It's about restarting the South African economy and ensuring that they were able to get it right. So I'm confident that we are in the right space. We are moving in the right direction. We have found our path to energy security. We are discovering our path to broadening the industrialization and creating the necessary jobs. And energy is going to be a catalyst. Like I said when I started, energy was a crisis, is the one that throttled and stifled economic growth. Now that the ESCOM has done tremendous work, thanks to the work of the board and the ESCOM management team, the grid is performing. On any given day, we have up to 4,000 megawatts on coal reserve. So stopping the machines from producing electricity because we've got more than enough electricity. But we're in the business of growing the South African economy. We don't celebrate that the units are on coal reserve. We must give that electricity to industry, and that's why we are finalizing our discussions with the smelters. All of them. Of course, we started with Samanco and Glencoe. We are going to expand to all of them so that they must restart the smelters. The furnaces must start working. Once the furnaces are restarted, the smelters, then people are into jobs. We are fighting hunger, we are fighting unemployment. The South African economy is going to grow. So really, this is what we have come to announce, to say that we are moving in the right direction. We will never be faced, we don't want to be faced with a situation of load shedding. Don't want to be faced with a situation where the economy is throttled. The albatross is electricity. We are freeing the South African economy so that we can get people into jobs. So thank you very much, TK.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, we will be issuing a statement that details or bears reference to the announcements made by the Minister. For now, we are ready to take questions from members of the media. The Minister and the panel in front of you are ready to provide any clarity you may seek. And we'll start with questions in the room before we go to Vanessa for online questions. Any hands? Antoinette? Chris? Is it just those two? After the questions, Vanessa, you'll... Oh, Katleho, in that order.
Just two questions. Good morning. Thanks, Robert, journalist. Firstly, can we please get the presentation that we can't follow, we can't really read through. And then secondly, Minister, you referred to the deal or the dispensation you are negotiating with the smelters. How crucial is that for the industrialization? And how is the progress, what is the progress? Because there's quite a lot to be done in a very short time.
Good morning, Chris Gillen here from EE Business Intelligence. Three questions, please. Firstly, of the 890 megawatts being announced today from Bitwinder 7, are all of these solar PV projects, or are there any wind projects amongst these four projects? My second question is, will there be any further announcements about additional wind projects relating to the new curtailment framework that has been approved, as I understand it, by the regulator, which should release additional wind capacity of, I think, about 3,000 megawatts or 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts. I can't remember the exact amount. But will there be any further announcements about wind projects resulting from the curtailment framework? And lastly, as I understand it, what you have announced today, Minister, is the pre-qualified bidders, not the final successful bidders. If you can just confirm that you're not announcing the successful bidders, that will still come from a request for proposal, and what you're announcing is those that have been pre-qualified. If you could clarify, please, when will the request for proposals go out for this first bid window of the ITP program, and when do you anticipate request for proposals from the second, third, fourth bid windows of the ITP program? Thank you.
Good morning, Ramokgopa here from the SABC. Mine is also in line with what Chris has just asked to say. When can we expect them to get the final approved qualified bidders where this process is concerned? And also around the opposition to this process. I'm not sure if the Minister has seen what the statement released by the National Union of Mine Workers around developments at Eskom, the unbundling, tweaking of that process. And they seem to believe that there's been a wholesale privatization of what has been happening in the country and the electricity grid. Maybe allay those fears and give us a sense of what then informs some of these developments, especially around privatization.
We have 2 online questions so far, both from Carol Payton at News 24. If the objective is to industrialize and develop SA leading bidders for round 3 and 4, why do you have a requirement that the 49% partner does not need prior transmission experience when we have very 51% black-owned companies that do have experience? How will you ensure that the foreign companies which have qualified will use local manufacturing capacity?
Thank you. So those are all the questions for this round. We'll take responses, after which we'll take the last round of questions.
Good morning to members of the media. So I will just speak to the questions regarding some of the elements pertaining to the ITP program. So essentially I'll speak to the program going forward. Early next year, in the first quarter of next year, the Minister will announce the 5 to 10 year pipeline for the ITP program. That will also detail the frequency of future bid windows and how the program will work going forward. So that will be addressed early next year. The teams are already sitting together and working out what that pipeline looks like for the next 5 to 10 years. Then secondly, in terms of the industrialization objectives, the industrialization objectives were not intended to exclude any firms with particular transmission experience. We've identified some of the elements that require correction going forward, as well as what future phases of the program will entail. In terms of foreign companies utilizing and leveraging a lot of the vast local experience we have in the transmission space, there are mechanisms to ensure that those elements are addressed. The transmission sector is very different to the generation sector, for instance, when the REAP program started, where there is a lot of capacity locally in South Africa. In this regard, the draft RFP also includes mechanisms for local EPC players as well as local O&M players, and those elements are also scored in the RFP itself. Those are the elements that I will address. Thank you, Minister.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Just dealing with the issue of the curtailment and whether wind or there's any other announcement that will be made. So our reading of what has been approved by NERSA, Chris, is based on the application that NTSSA submitted to the regulator. It was quite specific, and it was quite specific to the Capes, and it was quite specific to the wind. So when that approval was given, again, it was given for the specific areas. There's nothing outside of the Capes that has been, there's no framework that covers areas outside of the southern, western, and northern Cape. So at this point in time, there is no other anticipated announcement that will be made unless there are any changes.
But when?
Yeah, so at this point in time, I cannot answer the question of when, Chris, because we are busy with the allocation of the existing capacity that has just been freed up. So that process is ongoing. Thank you.
Good afternoon. With regards to the question on the announced 870 megawatt, whether it's PV only or also inclusive of onshore wind, it is only PV, solar PV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Maybe just to go to Antoinette's question with regards to the smelters. I've led an engagement with the big players, and I really want to say that the only reason that we're engaging really with Samanco and Glencoe is because they had made clear their intention to issue a Section 189 notice, essentially laying people off. And that's why we had prioritized that conversation. So the discussion started as early as June, I think, this year, just trying to understand what are the issues that are at play. So we arrived at the determination that the principal driver of them holding back on the pursuing the 189 and the possibility of opening the smelters that are under care and maintenance is the price of electricity. So you know that already they are benefiting under the negotiated price agreement, which moves them from the Megaflex 2 rand 12 cent kilowatt hour. They are at 135 cents. We had a conversation with them. We then went to 128 cents a kilowatt hour. We had further discussions, and we made a concrete offer of 87.7 cents a kilowatt hour. But that's still not sufficient, and really it's not a selfish consideration on behalf of the two parties. We know that there's a sweet spot. That sweet spot will be anything between 60 and 70 cents for us to really be in the mix. What do I mean by that is that we know that other jurisdictions are offering their players electricity at that range of 60 to 70 cents kilowatt hour. Although we have over 70%, electricity constitute anything between 40 to 52% of the cost of production. So it's a big number, when in fact your rivals are paying half of your price of the fee, so you will never be competitive. And then on the back of that, we then initiated a conversation, and of course you would have seen Eskom had released a statement. After I finished, we sat with all the unions, Solidarity, NUM and NUMSA, including the two players, because really the South African incorporated conversation. It's no more about Samanco and Glencoe. It's not about the unions. It's about the South African economy. And on the back of that, you would have seen that the MOU was released. We are going to find our path to the sweet on stream. Where we can have that conversation now thanks to the performance of Eskom. We now have the electricity to support the reopening of smelters. So it's in our interest that we are able to conclude that. Katlego, to your question, I had not seen the statement of NUM. I've just made the point that we have taken everyone on board. So if it relates to the issues on the transmission side, I've made the point there is no privatization of the transmission. I've made the point that this is a naturally occurring monopoly, so we have no intention of relinquishing ownership of the transmission. So what we are announcing on a concessional basis, they are going to build the transmission system operator will be responsible for the technical requirements, imposing that on the successful bidder. So they are really responsible for the wires and their maintenance of the wires, of course, over an agreed period. This is something that we are applying. I mean, let me bring it closer to home. You are seeing the improvement on the N3. You see the improvement on the, you get to pay to them. They get the responsibility of maintaining that road. But that road still remains principally an asset of the state. So we have done it there. So we're not starting anything new. We are simply starting it now in a new arena, in a new sector of transmission. We have done it for the roads. We have done it building major public buildings. I think the Department of DFFE, I think West States SAEs could be candidates, if I get it right, of how the state has partners with the private sector, the PPP model. This is just a concession. The state remains solely in ownership of that. So that's the point that we really want to make. We're not about to privatize. We had made the point, the commitment by my predecessor, may he so rest in peace, Minister Godan. Part of the conversation about unbundling was to engage with the unions. And that's why the issue of the transmission system operator must be handled with the care that is required, because we don't want to create an impression that now you have to initiate an exercise where the workers are removed out of what they know to be Eskom into a new entity without the process of negotiation. Those are the engagements that are going to happen with the unions. I had not seen the statement, but we are confident that we have covered all bases going into the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister and colleagues. We'll take the last round of questions.
Minister and Mr. Mandibala, this figure that you mentioned for the ferrochrome smelters that's currently under negotiation, somewhere between 60 cents to 70 cents or 87 cents per kilowatt hour. Are we talking here about just the energy component of the tariff or the price, or does that figure of 60 to 87 cents per kilowatt hour, is that the total price reflected in rand per kilowatt hour, cents per kilowatt hour? Does this include the fixed costs, the generation capacity cost, the transmission capacity charge costs, and any other fixed costs? Are the fixed costs going to be additional to that figure that you're negotiating about, the energy, or does that energy figure?
Thank you, Anthony Slavitt again. Also on the smelter deal, there seems to be a kind of a subsidy that money comes from, whether you can quantify it. And then also the pre-qualified bids for the transmission program. Can you give us an idea of how many kilometers they represent, or how many kilometers you thank you, Vanessa.
Terence Freeman from Engineering News has 4 questions. What issues need to be tended, and local contractors be part of the pre-tender discussion? If so, what level of local content is expected in the first RFP, and under what legal framework will the local content be determined? What is the expected capital investment value of the first projects to be built by the ITPs? What still needs to take place before the CGV is set up? Innocent from SABC Channel Africa. What message does this announcement send to the investors about policy certainty and South Africa's commitment to energy reform? How will communities near these projects benefit beyond electricity generation in terms of ownership, development, and economic inclusion? More questions from Carol Payton at News 24. On the unbundled vision for the next state of NTCSA, you seemed to suggest that the NTCSA will be a transmission company that competes with the private sector to build transmission assets. Can you please elaborate on that? One more question from Carol Payton. Please explain a little more clearly how the RFP will make use of local transmission manufacturing capacity. That's all we have online.
Thank you. So those are all the questions. We'll now get responses. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the questions that have been raised by Terence at Engineering News. So in terms of what needs to be resolved from now until the release of the RFP, there are many elements pertaining to the credit guarantee vehicle, and it's, of course, a process on its own. It's contingent on, development partners that are also taking equity in that vehicle. Our uptake thus far has been exceptionally encouraging, and we're already sitting with quite a lot of commitments from development partners. The CGV operationalization, or the credit guarantee vehicle, is envisaged in the second half of next year, and that's very important from a lender and bidder certainty perspective to ensure that they will have a full understanding of what the mechanisms are to actually de-risk investment into the sector. So we're going to be working, we've already been working very hard on the CGV, led by our National Treasury colleagues with support from the Department of Electricity and Energy. And next year, a lot of that work will intensify. So as the Minister alluded to, there are various engagements, board engagements at the World Bank level, which are envisaged for early next year. And then the International Finance Corporation and MIGA, with the IFC also taking an equity stake. But critical to that, as the Minister mentioned, that the state takes a minority but anchor shareholding in the credit guarantee vehicle, with it being a blended finance risk-sharing platform. So it's essential that we meet key milestones that are envisaged for the final RFP that we release is bankable, robust, and has sufficient inputs from the market to ensure that what we're releasing is bankable. And that's what's happening. So in terms of the what level of local content in the first RFP, of course, we've had extensive engagements and also partnering with our colleagues from the DTIC and IDC in terms of making these indications and how local content will work. There's a basis on which we do this in the country. It's not the first time. We're not creating anything new. The DTIC has local content designations, and this program is no different to that. So the local content designations that ESCOM, the NTCSA already abide to, this program will be no different. And of course, the NIP elements that the Minister mentioned in his presentation earlier. So this is essentially on the local content. Then what I'd also like to outline is that there's also elements pertaining to non-designated local content. So they're the DTIC designations. For instance, there we look at cables. I'll give you one example. The designations, they are 90% from a local content perspective. But they are non-designated local content sectors, and through the 10% scoring, we're also seeking to ensure that that gets lifted. There's also elements pertaining to local contracting, which we'd previously highlighted when it comes to EPC and O&M providers, and that also is also made provision for in the scoring criteria on the ITP framework. So I think I've addressed the elements pertaining to the CGV, and there was the question from Carol Payton on the localization elements have also been addressed. I'd just like to close with mentioning the NTCSA mutation. We've seen this being successful in multiple other markets globally, where you have, in India, you've got Power Grid, which is essentially, could be analogous to the NTCSA. You've got Power Grid that essentially competes as an ITP alongside the private sector. In Brazil, you've got Eletrobras, which is the state utility, partially state utility. Eletrobras also competes as an ITP alongside private sector players. Thank you very much, Minister.
Let me start from where Shakira has left it, just to make the point that as I speak now, NTCSA is building transmission. So whilst we are announcing this program, NTCSA is running its program internally and on balance sheet expansion. And I think this year they are doing about 420 plus kilometers. Next year they are built to do over 560 kilometers. So yes, NTCSA will be a player. It's not crowding out the private sector. NTCSA, once it becomes efficient, a bit more robust, NTCSA can compete competently or with other players. So the answer is yes. We want NTCSA to get to that point. As Shakira is making the point that in other jurisdictions, that's what is happening. So this is not the demise of NTCSA as a player in rollout of new transmission capacity. And the TSO, so I always make the point, reference must be made to what is articulated in the amendment. The amendment talks about the creation of an independent TSO. The amendment doesn't say anything about where the assets should be allocated. Again, I mean, that asset allocation has got huge implications on the fiscus, on how you move those assets. Whether it goes, the assets is fully independent, standalone, it's got huge implications on labor relations issues. The point I raised earlier on, that there's an engagement that must happen with unions. The amendment says that you are going to transition by 2030, you must be that independent. We have started the process, and in fact, our own timelines suggest that by 2029. I always make the point, I was in one forum, I was making the point, we must not rest of the sovereign. We're going to do this at a pace and scale that we can afford. We have made that decision. It's not going with the assets, but the system operator will be independent going forward. And then to Chris's question, yes, so that's a final number. So it's not just the cost of primary energy. It includes conversion. It includes on how that can be financed. We have a really good proposal before us. I don't want to negotiate with my partners through the media, but we have a solid solution that is not going to overburden the fiscus. I mean, to Antoinette's questions, we don't want to get to a situation where this effort is fully subsidized, because remember, if there's a shortfall, that shortfall must be socialized. There is no free lunch. Someone pays for it, and ultimately it will be the end consumer. So we don't want to burden the end consumer, and that's why we need that bit of time for us to work out what that is. But the core element of what will support this proposal are in place. So we're answering the cost of primary energy and the like. We are confident we are going to find each other. We have no doubt that we're going to find each other. And again, Antoinette, yes, I mean, the final, what is with them, a solid proposal, is that 87.7 cent kilowatt hour. And then that has got the implication, it comes to about, like I said, these conversations will make them transparent, because the South African taxpayer ought to know. So that comes to about 5.2 billion rands. Then we find a way of how that gets to be addressed, because we are not going to pass that to the end consumer again by March of next year. The pre-qualified, the length of kilometers is 1,164 kilometers, and it's about $1 billion US dollars that we are talking of here in the first package that we are talking of. So, if you like, about 17 billion rands. And of course, we did say we are going to ramp up going into the future. And then to Innocent's question, I think what this does, it gives confidence to the market. Remember, when I started, I spoke about the wheeling framework. I spoke about the regulation, transmission regulations. I spoke about the TSO. I spoke about access to the grid access rules. So most of those are in place. So we're really showing to the market that this process is irreversible. And again, this is another confidence-building measure to come out within the timelines we have set for ourselves to say this is the direction we are going. The fact that Minister of Finance has said our initial seed capital, 2 billion rand in the CGV, he announced it in the medium-term budget policy statement. Again, that should give a reassurance that we are moving in the right direction. I took time to explain the local economic development has got two dimensions. As you are making a correct observation, it is those communities that are in the immediate footprint of these projects. Again, they're going to get huge benefits in that there's direct participation, construction, so on and so forth. And then there are bigger benefits to the South African Gauteng. It doesn't mean that those benefits are going to be just isolated to those areas. If we decide to build a factory in Limpopo, it means that the benefits is going to extend to those areas. So really there's a broader benefits to the South African economy and not just to those economies within or communities rather, within the immediate footprint of those power stations. So really I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for coming through. We had made the point that we are going to ensure that we keep the public abreast. We had made an announcement some time back when we came and presented to the country our ambition to end load reduction. So we are in Tzaneen. We had already started, but the big scale now, we're in Tzaneen, the 17th or 18th, somewhere there. And then we spoke about lowering the cost of electricity. I said to the country that we are going to introduce solutions that are going to make it possible for us to locate poor areas that are far-flung. We are in the two villages in Musina. So those people in Musina, they are going to have they've never had an experience of lights on, they've never been connected. They are going to have the lights on. If they choose to light a candle, it's because it's a Christmas candle, not because they're using it for lighting, because now they can switch on. There's solar, there's PV, there's battery, and then we're also giving them free Wi-Fi. That's how we're going to transform these spaces, so that a boy child in the rural village of villages of Musina has got the same opportunities same as that of a boy and girl child from the suburb of Waterkloof, at least from an information access point of view, at least from an electricity point of view. Of course, there are other areas where the ones in the more suburban, affluent areas will continue to surpass them. But at least the foundational network industries will be in place. We are going to give them a chance in life. The point I'm conveying is that we have committed to end a situation where households don't have access to electricity. I said we'll do it by 2029. We are going to do it by 2029. I said that we are going to get it right. I said the load shedding will be behind us, the lights are on. We said we'll grow the South African economy. That's what we are announcing today. It's about the believability of the state. That which we set out to do, we are going to do. And one of the key messages I've learned in this space is that surround yourself with those who know better than you. So we've got the most competent team, IPP office, NTCSA. You can mention them. ESCOM, the best in their craft. They have no relationship with the minister. The relationship they have is their expertise with their industry. We let them be, and we're going to solve the electricity challenge. And we can take that template into other sectors of the economy. Let those who know better than us be appointed, the best amongst us, to the fore. And that's how we're going to get the South African economy going. At least we have shown the template at ESCOM, that you get the best amongst us, that what we did, the board and the ESCOM executive, the lights are on, the economy is being turbocharged, the ITPO office, when the...
Thank you very much, Minister and colleagues. So indeed, that brings us to the end of today's briefing. Perhaps just to add on to what the Minister has articulated with regards to this week's program, we will be in Tzaneen Community Hall at 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th, and then on Friday, we'll be in Musina. On the 17th, indeed. Wednesday, the 17th, 9 o'clock, Tzaneen Community Hall. And then on the 19th,